Hello everyone, I'm back with another project. This time I'll take my old angle grinder, I'll make bunch of parts, only to simplify tube cutting. Using an angle grinder is quite straightforward operation. You scribe a line and then it is literally in your hand. The less precise you are, the more waviness you get in the part being cut. But it turns a bit tricky when it comes to tube cutting. Even scribing the part is usually more challenging. But you can use this simple trick, which works only if the base is perpendicular. Otherwise, you can use a piece of paper. Cutting itself is also problematic. The curved surface means that you must rotate the piece. It is also harder to follow the line. See the gap? It might be a problem. Let's change that. I plan to use my old angle grinder, which currently serves as a tool for rust removal. By the way, this fella was super cheap, and when I bought it, I was like, if it survives 1 year, good. If it dies, it dies. That was 18 years ago. Unbelievable. I use this hole to mount it to my tube cutting jig. I'm not gonna cover the build of the wall jig because it is in my previous video. I will focus just on the angle grinder add-on. The concept is super simple. It is a 3-piece construction, the base, a swing arm for positioning the angle grinder, and finally a swivel base for mounting the angle grinder. And once again, it is a good excuse to use leftovers from previous projects. I'm starting by cleaning the surface of the 5/4 tube. It is in bad shape because I use it to move my machines. There are still some flaws, but they have no effect on functionality. Now it's time to cut all the pieces to the proper dimensions. The cutting is done, which means that I can test assemble the construction. I also plan to use ball bearings. It's an absolute overkill, a hole through would be good enough, but why not? And the swivel base. Here will be a hole for mounting the angle grinder. Before I get any further, I need to clean the ends. Now it's time to make the part that will hold the bearings. The housing for the ball bearings is 8 mm deep and the diameter is 28 mm. It's slightly smaller, so it will be perfect press fit. Knocking edges and the part is done. There is a large gap, not the best scenario for welding. But it is a good excuse to use my large boring head. One side is done, let's move to another. The depth of cut is just 0.5 mm, so it takes me a while to finish it. See? Much better now. Another part is a shaft for the swivel base. I would make it from free machining steel, but it is problematic to weld, so the rebar it is. Adding thread for the safety screw. This side will be pressed to the swivel base and secured by welding. And now the last part, the swivel base itself. As always, I need to square the part first. Here I am drilling a hole for the shaft. Another hole is for mounting the angle grinder. I use this tool for easy chamfering. At this point are all the parts ready for welding. Wait, I forgot to cut a slot inside the sleeve. I did not cut it all the way through because it would clamp the end mill, and it would also spring back after loosening the vise. I made this little safety screw off camera, which means I'm finally ready for welding. I prefer to start with end cap, because I don't weld every day, so I become rusty. So it is good warm up, and I'm going to grind the welds anyway, so the quality doesn't matter. This piece is to reinforce mounting holes, so there is a lesser chance of bending. Finishing the part by welding the 5/4 tube on. Now the swing arm, starting by welding this assembly that acts as a clamp to the sleeve. Finishing the part by cutting the edges of the slot. Here I'm using Mac bases for prepping the parts for tacking. Time to finish the swing arm by welding the ball bearing housing. And finally the last part, which is welding the shaft to the swivel base. All the parts are ready for assembling. First I need to press in the ball bearings. I've got to figure out the proper order. Pressing the bearing into the housing. Then the shaft of the swivel base. And finishing by pressing the second ball bearing. The safety screw and the assembly is done. The last step is to improve the corrosion resistance. This is so satisfying. And now it's time to mount it to the tube cutting jig. I did a little upgrade since the last time. I changed the front wheels for ball bearings to add some fire resistance, but I kept the rubberized rear wheels for better traction. The add-on is mounted to the jig by 2 screws, so it's quite fast installation. The swing arm is a little bit stiff, but it's not a problem. Tightening the knob and it's very rigid. I made bolt for mounting the angle grinder to the swivel base. Let's test it. The question is the time spent cutting the tube worth it? Well, here's the tube cut by a plasma cutter, not super precise, but fast. The same tube cut by the angle grinder add-on, and as you can see it's much better. I want to test how the add-on performs on this large tube. But I need to switch to my larger angle grinder first. I can already say that it will take quite some time, since the wall thickness is 7 mm. It was way easier with the plasma cutter. But after some time I succeeded even with the angle grinder. A little cleanup and it looks fine. But is the cut precise? Not really, but it is good enough. The problem is probably caused by the runout. So, is the add-on worth it? Yes, but only for 10 volt, not bent tubes. Otherwise, the cut is crooked. As always, thank you for watching and till next time. By the way, this fella was super cheap, and when I bought it, I was like, if it survives 1 year, good. If it dies, it dies. That was 18 years ago. Unbelievable. By the way, this fella was super cheap, and when I bought it, I was like, if it survives 1 year, good. If it dies, it dies. That was 18 years ago. Unbelievable. By the way, this fella was super cheap, and when I bought it, I was like, if it survives 1 year, good. If it dies, it dies. That was 18 years ago. It's crazy. By the way, this fella was super cheap, and when I bought it, I was like, if it survives 1 year, good. If it dies, it dies. That was 18 years ago. Unbelievable.